Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. All the craziness happening right now with the Wikileaks stuff. I mean, obviously the emails are pretty revealing. It's really discouraging to know that despite all this evidence against the Clinton campaign and just all the evil, the terrible things, the collusion, the conspiracy admitted and everything, globalism admitted, Donald Trump even coming out and calling out Hillary Clinton for the globalism that she wants to create. It's all just so out in the open, yet tons of people are still going to vote for Hillary. This is just a disaster. We know that the mainstream media is controlled. One of the outlets that's been heavily controlled is the Washington Post. Now, they've been completely biased. But I don't want to talk about politics right now because that's obvious, right? You can look at the political messaging happening from an outlet like the Washington Post and know that it's completely bogus, or at least spun so badly in one direction that there is absolutely collusion happening behind the scenes. These emails reveal it. So think about that as I show you this video, okay? So the story I want to talk about is by the Washington Post. It's titled, "In a Medical First, Brain Implants Allow Paralyzed Man to Feel Again." Just keep this in mind as well as you watch it. And again, I've brought this scripture up before. I know there is a straightforward biblical interpretation, and I'm talking about the statue from Daniel 2 representing the kingdoms leading up to the kingdom of Christ. So I get that. But I know that biblical prophecy is cyclical. I think the Daniel 7 statue is actually a reflection of a future fulfillment. And I think it's in conjunction with Revelation 13, like I've talked about before. But if there is a cyclical nature to prophecy, and if there is something to be said about the pattern of iron not mixing with miry clay, and that example that God used to show the end times kingdom, or a form of an end times kingdom, what would happen towards the end before Christ came that first time, but before also Christ comes the second time. Think about the spin from Washington Post. Think about the scriptures, iron mixing with miry clay, but will not cleave to one another, as you watch this. Check this out.
I want to do it because I'll be able to, and someone needs to. I'm looking forward to when all these little steps and processes we've been working on can actually all work together. Brain. I don't have any finger movement or thumbs, just kind of have fists, which I still get along with. I can still type with the knuckles of my pinkies.
Nathan was injured in a car accident about 10 years ago and is paralyzed from the neck down, more or less, although he does have he has good movement in his shoulders. Without sensation, movement is it's really challenging, and when we think about our hands, in fact, a huge function of our hand is the sensory component. We are not just, we use our hands to interact with people, to interact with objects, and all of those interactions require sensation.
So we're doing the study to see if we can try and improve prosthetics, pretty much get sensation back.
So the question we really were asking here is, can we make a person feel like they're experiencing touch from their hand if we electrically stimulate a part of the brain that we know is responsible for processing that touch?
And so we call it bidirectional control. So not only are we intercepting signals for control, but we're feeding back the touch that the artificial hand encounters when it makes contact with an object.
The way we did that was by implanting little electrodes into a part of the sensory cortex that we know is involved in interpreting or listening to signals that normally come from the hand.
I think my biggest fear is we put in a set of electrodes and there's nothing there. We sit down as a group with all the imaging. We have MEG data, we have functional MRI data, we have our structural images we've done. We usually do this so that we have all of that in our minds before we get there. I bring part of the research team to the OR, and so we do test in the electrodes before we put them in. And then when we get to that moment before we're actually going to inject the electrodes into the surface of the brain, everybody has to be in agreement that those are the spots we want to pick.
We took a lot of time trying to figure out where to implant the arrays based on the pre-surgical imaging, based on some non-human primate work that had told us about the physiology of how the brain works, but we've never been able to know before what it feels like to stimulate in the brain.
Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Where are you feeling that?
Like very base. Today's the first day that we were linking the signals to the robot arm. Apparently it worked great. I couldn't see, but it felt like I was getting my fingers touched or pushed, and they tell me I did it right. So index and middle. Did you just do more than one, or am I going crazy? Pinky. Middle. Pinky.
20 out of 20.
And so, when he clearly says index finger, middle finger, pinky finger, it was many years of work to get to that moment. And I think there were a lot of people who were very excited to see that it was working like we expected it to.
So these neurons normally are active when you touch the hand. Here, we make them active by electrical stimulation. And what we found was that when we do that, our subject, Nathan, feels a sensation that comes from that same region of his own hand. And so when we stimulate in his brain, he perceives a sense of touch that comes from his own hand, even though we're not actually touching his hand.
Pinky. It's a really weird sensation. Sometimes it feels kind of like electrical, and sometimes it's more of a pressure. For the most part, I can tell most of the fingers with definite precision. Some of the places where I have less sensation would be like the little and ring fingers. They're not as defined.
Right, so I've said a little bit about the sensation, and that really is the new thing in the study that's really important. But one of the, I think, really significant findings here for us is that Nathan is able to repeat the same type of movement and dexterity and performance in controlling the arm that we were able to get with our last participant. And so we've been really, really pleased that Nathan's ability and skill in moving the arm is essentially approaching what we achieved before.
And what we really want to do now that they're able to feel what the hand is doing is increase the dexterity of that control. So have them really interact and manipulate objects and be able to regulate the amount of force they're applying to an object to grab things gently or firmly.
I think that Nathan, like Jan, like Tim, like every subject who's been a part of this, has wanted to be an explorer, has wanted to go out and do what's not been done before. And it's been life-changing for them, and I've seen that with Nathan as well, and so that's another form of gratification. The way we've been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish here has been collaborations, and these collaborations across departments, they cross disciplines. We've been able to get funding from the National Institutes of Health, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, from DARPA, from several different sources. But what started this was some funding from UPMC and this unbelievable scientific community that we have at the University of Pittsburgh that UPMC has supported for a long time.
I have to say thank you to the people who've been willing to participate. I mean, without our volunteers, we couldn't be here. And without their vision that they might be involved in something that is way bigger than them, that has the potential to help lots of people in the future, we wouldn't be here.
Now, I've had conversations with people who said, well, yeah, technology, it's moving ahead. Who cares? Why does it matter? Well, because of stories like this. This is actually helping somebody who is paralyzed to have feelings in their hands again and mobility in a certain way. This is quite remarkable. And there is a human element of wanting to have that person have that restoration. It's a victory in a certain way, scientifically and all this stuff. But again, looking at it from this overarching perspective of eschatology, of just civilization, society, where we're headed, these types of developments, although will help those in need, might be something that enhances the normal human being to powers that, can be abused. So that's really the thing that we're warning against, and lots of science fiction have touched on that. But if you notice at the very end of this video, there's a tag that clearly states that this was in conjunction with the research done at DARPA. And if we talk about DARPA, we start talking about super soldiers, the developments of robot military armies. I mean, craziness, right? And so this all ties back into the New World Order system. Again, this is the Washington Post reporting it, making it a feel-good story, right? Because they want people to accept this as the next phase. And again, the research end of it is quite remarkable. I admit it's fascinating. I admit it's great for some of these people who are paralyzed to have these sorts of opportunities. But spiritually speaking, let's talk about that. You know, that's what I want to know from these people that are willing to put themselves in these research projects and, you know, allow their bodies to be experimented on. Who do they believe they really are? You know, are they a child of God, or are they just, you know, an evolved creature? So those are the questions I would have for them. And I'm sure, you know, they have thought about many things philosophical and, you know, facing near death. I'm sure they have experiences and thoughts that, you know, we can only imagine. But for me, it's always a spiritual conversation. It's always framed in that spiritual framework, because otherwise I don't think we can get to the truth of the matter. So if you ever bring up brain-machine interface and people say, yeah, but that's years down the line, show them the story, because it's obvious it's starting to happen already. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.